Okay, it says we are live streaming. If the cat does not destroy his microphone, his headphone cord will be fine. So everybody, I have the great pleasure of welcoming Dr. Barry Sears to the podcast. And I have his book Resolution Zone right here, which has a bio. I'm going to go ahead and just introduce you briefly to everybody because a lot of people don't know who you are, and I want to make sure that they do because this is important stuff. He is a leading authority on the impact of diet on inflammation. He's a former research scientist at Boston University School of Medicine and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, founder of one of the first biotech companies in Massachusetts that has been in continuous operation since 1976. The author of more than 50 scientific publications, holds 14 US patents in the areas of intravenous cancer drug delivery systems and the dietary regulation of hormonal responses for the treatment of cardiovascular disease. The general awareness of Dr. Sears' research on dietary control of hormonal and genetic responses began with the publication of his landmark book, The Zone, which both of us read way back when.
Back then.
We wish we had heeded, or at least I do. And it became a #1 New York Times bestseller. The books he's written on the Zone technology have sold more than 6 million copies in the US and have been translated into 23 different languages. The Resolution Zone, which is this book here, brings together his decades of research using diet as a powerful drug, we'll put that in scare quotes, to address the problem of unresolved inflammation that is the ultimate cause of chronic disease.
I'll hold it up.
Sure, yeah, go ahead and hold it up again. The word inflammation is something that we've heard a lot lately, and that is one of the reasons that we wanted to speak to you today. But, you know, in terms of our history with the Zone, both of us read the book way back then when, even though he's from Europe, he read it as well. And for me, you know, I've never been somebody who's been concerned with my weight. And so I am regretting to say that it didn't completely sink in the importance of the inflammation piece until more recently. And so I, you know, wish I had adhered to your principles all through this. And as I said, I want to bring everybody's awareness to it because I feel like there are things we can do to take charge of our own health today that a lot of people should be aware of. So we thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my honor.
Well, and I wanted to ask you just at the beginning, can you just tell people briefly, and you've done this a million times, what is the Zone diet? How does it compare to the USDA recommendations, the standard American diet? Maybe keto is something they're familiar with. How does it fit in that landscape?
Well, first of all, we have to make a distinction between the Zone and the Zone diet. The Zone is where we can control inflammation. We need some, otherwise we'll be sitting ducks. Our microbes would invade our body, our injuries would never heal, but we have to turn it off. So you need some inflammation, but not too much. So that's the Zone. Now, how to get there? Well, the diet is the key component. So when I talked about the Zone diet, what it is, it's an anti-inflammatory diet, not for weight loss, but to keep inflammation in a zone, not too high, but not too low. And obviously, we're now faced with COVID-19, we're saying, oh, this inflammation is everywhere. Well, the fact is, it is. And the reason we have problems in chronic disease and COVID-19, like infectious disease, is because our inability to turn off inflammation. That's the power of the diet. If you treat it as a drug, and that is using it at the right time and at the right dose, you have the ability to maintain inflammation in that zone when it's basically turned on when you need it and turned off when you don't. And if you can maintain that, you've got the key to slowing down the aging process. Because why do we age? We get injuries all the time, but they heal less efficiently as we get older. And as they heal less efficiently, we start developing all the complications we call chronic disease.
Yeah, no, and we have heard inflammation, the term cytokine made it into your book as well. We've noticed, and this was before anybody was talking about the cytokine storms that happen with COVID. and that, you know, people are not able to shut those off within their bodies. And they've been, of course, using various treatments to help people with severe COVID turn those off. But you're saying that if perhaps people had adhered to the principles that we'll talk about today, that they may have not been as susceptible to severe COVID. Is that right?
The answer is correct. You know, we have to realize that only about 20% of the individuals in America who've been infected with the COVID virus basically are sick enough that they have to go to a hospital. So we should be asking the question, what about the other 80%, the 40% who are asymptomatic, and the other 40% who are, they have symptoms, but they're more like a case of the flu. So we have a gradation. And this is why the primary risk factor for basically being hospitalized with COVID-19 is obesity. Why? Because when you're obese, two things happen. One, you're in a constant state of inflammation. And now the COVID infection becomes like the camel, like the straw that breaks the camel's back. And two, the more excess body fat you have and the inflammation induces, it makes your immune system weaker. So we really have two pandemics which basically have coincided in America. One, obesity, and the other of the COVID-19.
Now, it's not the case that only obesity causes inflammation, though, right? I mean, there's other people who are inflamed even though they are thin, perhaps, right? They can
Exactly. And how can you tell? Well, how can you tell if you have high cholesterol? You can't look in the mirror.
No.
So you test. And that's why the beauty of the blood will tell you if you're inflamed or not. If you're not inflamed, whatever you're doing, you keep on doing it. You're doing a good job.
Right.
Now, if you are inflamed, maybe it's time to think about changing your lifestyle. And the primary part of our lifestyle we can change is the diet.
Now, if someone is listening to this today and they're worried about Omicron, and they think, oh gosh, I'm going to get it and I want to be in the best shape that I can to not wind up in the hospital, et cetera. And suppose today they adopted a zone type diet so that they got themselves into the zone as quickly as possible. How quickly could they make a significant difference in their health and improve their ability to battle?
The answer is about 1 to 2 months. So again, the changes are rapid. But that's the good news. But the bad news is it only takes 1 or 2 days to lose all those benefits. You say, oh my God, I have to watch what I eat the rest of my life. And say, get used to it. Because this is like drugs. Drugs only work if you take them. If you don't take them, they won't work. We have to look at diet, say, but it's not saying, but everybody's an expert in diet. The reality is diet is incredibly complex. And it's now understanding the molecular biology of how the food we eat controls really what I call systems-based biology. It's like your computer. Basically, it controls what happens there, and you can orchestrate this if you know the rules. The rules haven't changed in 40 million years, and they're unlikely to change tomorrow. Now, does it say that I'll just follow an appropriate dietary program? No, don't be a ninny. Do other things, like social distancing and washing your hands and even taking vaccines. Now, the vaccines we have aren't really vaccines. They're really more injectable drugs. But at least they're another part of an overall strategy to basically allow your body, if infected with the virus, to mount an appropriate inflammatory response and then turn it off.
We could talk more about the issue of the vaccines itself, because they have potentially, in my experience and what we're looking at, it caused some people inflammation. Maybe some people have had a hard time turning off an inflammatory response to the vaccines themselves, but that's true of the disease as well, right?
Exactly.
But so when you talk about, okay, this is a diet that you should follow as much as you want to be healthy for the rest of your life, how difficult is this diet? Can you explain to people basically what it involves?
Well, you need 3 things. The first thing you need is basically a hand. The second thing you need is an eye. And the last thing you need is a watch. Now, if you have those 3 things, you can follow this program for the rest of your life. And here are the rules. At each meal, you divide the plate into 3 equal sections. That's why you need the eye. On 1/3 of the plate, you put some low-fat protein. And how much? The amount you can put on the palm of your hand. Now, I'm 6'5", so my palm's a little bigger than most, but not that much bigger. Now, what about the other 2/3 of the plate? You fill it with colorful carbohydrates. They're usually called fruits and vegetables. Why are they colorful? They contain chemicals called polyphenols. And finally, why do you need the watch? Because if you balanced your plate correctly and add just a dash of fat to it, then for the next 5 hours, you will not be hungry. That's the good news. The bad news is every 5 hours, the rest of your life, the game starts again.
So it really is the case. You could have been a perfect zone dieter, and then in the pandemic, the stress hits you, and so you fall off. And within a day, you're more susceptible to COVID, or within, I mean, is it really
probably about 2 to 3 days.
2 to 3 days. Okay.
Now, I wasn't the first one to think about this. Actually, your great-grandmother did.
Mm-hmm.
She said a couple things. One, you can't leave the table until you eat all your vegetables. Why? Because they're rich in fermentable fiber, which is key for gut health, and it's hard to overconsume vegetables. Now, she said one other thing very important, which is key to the zone concept. You can't leave the house until you take your tablespoon of cod liver oil. The world's most disgusting food, still is, but very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Now, why is that important? Because omega-3 fatty acids are the building blocks of a group of hormones, only recently discovered, that basically turn off inflammation. So if you don't have adequate levels in your body, you have no way of turning off inflammation, whatever the cause. So again, a lot of these concepts have been around for millennia. But what I've tried to do is basically put them into a unified format and supply the science, the complex science of how our food affects our hormones and how it affects the expression of our genes, which makes basically the food the next bastion of biotechnology. It can do things biotechnology can't even imagine doing. Yet if you basically know the rules of the road, it's easy, as long as you have one hand, one eye, and one watch.
That, of course, because you deal with the system in a holistic way, if you forgive me the word, instead of treating only a symptom.
Exactly, because we are always looking for magic bullets. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about systems, and I don't like to use the word holistic, but it's a good word. Systems is you can't push one part of the system without affecting another part. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about systems failure, like you're on your airplane and systems fail, what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. You're going to crash. So you want those systems to be working all the time and getting feedback from each other. They're in constant communication inside the cell. The diet is one of your key factors that can maintain the fidelity of that communication system.
When you talked about the cod liver oil, this brought in my mind one of the rabbit trails that I've gone down in the past and probably made myself worse in an attempt to get myself better. One of them is vitamin D. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of discussion about vitamin D levels with COVID, but also in the research that I've done, because I've had autoimmune problems, I've seen people who've had tremendous success, apparently, by using very high doses of vitamin D. What is your perspective on using vitamin D to address autoimmunity versus what you do?
Well, again, vitamin D is a role player, and it's, there's a lot of association with low levels of vitamin D and many chronic diseases. Yet in every time they try to give high levels of vitamin D, the data has been pathetic in terms of controlled clinical studies. Now, what's the reason? I believe the reason is vitamin D is incredibly important in maintaining gut health, because this is where our first point of attack for many pathogens will be through our gut. But it has to be, I say it's a role player compared to the other three. One, the diet, because the diet is now controlling hormonal responses. Two, the amount of omega-3 fatty acids. It's controlling hormonal responses. And the polyphenols. These are the chemicals that give fruits and vegetables their color. Why are they important? They control the master switch, the kind of the head coach, as it might be, in every cell in the body that orchestrates your metabolism. So vitamin D is a nice adjunct, a nice addition, but you have to have the three players doing their job as effectively as possible.
Would you say if you are a strict adherent to the zone diet, that your vitamin D requirements go down such that if you were taking too much, you would be more likely to get toxic on vitamin D? Is there that sort of relationship, or not really?
Not really. Vitamin D is how much should I take? Again, the blood will tell you. You try to keep it in a level about 60 to 70 of nanograms per deciliter. That's a reasonable level. But it depends on the person and where they live. So again, we use the blood as guidelines, like navigational buoys that tell us, are we basically doing everything we can do, but never let the tail wag the dog. Don't think a supplement is going to basically do all the heavy lifting. And that's why when we talk about the resolution zone, it's how basically the diet, the omega-3 fatty acids, and the polyphenols all work together as a team. And if they're working together effectively, then we can heal more effectively from any disease. And so this is really the key. It's not saying that you'll never get a disease or you'll never die. It's saying what you're doing, you're basically putting the odds in your favor. Then anything else you do, taking vitamin D, exercising, meditation, these are all nice additional add-ons. But if we want to look in terms of the ability of a lifestyle, I use the 80-15-5 rule. 80% of living the best possible life your genes will give you will come from your diet. 15% from doing exercise, and 5% from stress reduction. Now, they're not all equal. So it says, okay, where do I put my efforts? Oh, I'll go to yoga class. It's saying, well, that's good for 5. What about the other 95%? So again, these are, are verities from the ages. But again, we can now understand that wisdom in terms of new discoveries in biotechnology.
In terms of someone gauging their personal need to really put some attention on this, right? There are 3 different types of tests that you have recommended to people in the book. Can you tell them what they are? Tell people what they are?
Well, these are the blood tests, which are actually quite common by and large. One is you want to basically make sure that your ability to control your lipids and really insulin resistance is under control. A very simple test, the ratio of triglycerides to HDL. Every time you have an annual physical, that will be on the test. Divide the triglycerides by the HDL levels. If it's less than 1, you're in great shape, at least from a dietary standpoint. Another test is a ratio of 2 fatty acids in the blood. One is called arachidonic acid, the building block of all of the inflammatory hormones, and the EPA, which is an omega-3 fatty acid, the building block of the pro-resolution hormones. You need them in balance. So that balance will tell you, are you inflamed or you're not? And the final aspect is your glycosylated hemoglobin, the kind of measure of long-term blood sugar levels. If this is low, between 4.9 and 5.1, you're doing a great job. Now, and only if all 3 are in those appropriate ranges, you're in the zone. Now, what percentage of Americans are in the zone? I'd say probably 0.5%.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
what do we do? Say, well, I don't want to work hard on my diet and exercise and stress reduction. There must be a pill out there. I'm saying, dream on. I've got the Brooklyn Bridge too, also for sale. So we basically abdicated our responsibility to the drug industry to save us from ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And so in your let's say over the course of this is over 30 years of publishing on this, you clearly have encountered resistance to your type of solution. How do you look back on that now, knowing, of course, that perhaps some more attention to these things would have done a lot of good?
Well, it would have, but again, that is always saying that truth goes through 3 stages. The first stage is ridicule. The second stage is violent reaction. And the third stage is saying, of course, it's obvious. So if you hang around long enough, you'll get to the third stage.
Well, we are, at least, yeah.
Well,
we never had a violent reaction. I feel like I went out looking for some of the magic solutions in terms of, if I just eliminate this food or that food, everything will be fine, you know?
Well, but I say that because it's always about education, and science. The science of nutrition is incredibly complex. So we basically gloss it over. So I've tried to basically put forward the growing body of science to say, here are the facts, and here's how we can manipulate these facts using our diet if you choose. And if so, then your goal, a longer and better life, is more likely. And the medical term is really health span. It's not how long you live, it's really what is the quality of life in the ages. Well, health span is defined as longevity minus years of disability. The health span in America is actually going down. And say, well, how can we have every drug company in the world located here? Well, that's really not the answer, because the drugs are effective, but only to a certain extent. If you've already basically built up these inflammatory pressures in the body that doesn't allow it to heal itself, then the drugs get weaker and weaker in their ability to basically, hopefully, treat the symptoms of a chronic disease. So we really want to go to the basis, what causes chronic disease? And it's not so much its inflammation, at least in my opinion, but the inability to turn it off. And that's where the diet becomes so important.
Yeah, sure. Well, I have all the practical questions, and he's got himself a theoretical interest in the mind-body-gut connection. Have you heard of Bernard Mandeville?
I have not heard of him, but the mind-body-gut connection is incredibly complex. And it's a fascinating one, because you're dealing with things which are not easily accessible. It's hard to basically do little biopsies on the brain, not recommended. The gut is incredibly complex, and how they communicate that is even more so. And so this whole aspect of not only, I'd say, of the mental aspects, but basically the physical aspects. So again, if we ignore the ability of the gut to basically act as a nexus of communication with the brain, and we do so at our own risk.
Well, I guess you made an appeal to somebody's great-grandmother, so I'll feel free to make a similar argument. Because Bernard Mandeville is known in some circles because he was was seen usually as a cynical critic of the commercial society, this in 18th century England. But he was also a medical doctor and a lifelong researcher of the phenomenon of hypochondria. And of course, today we define hypochondria as a mind-driven phenomenon. But in those days, they believed it was located somewhere in the gut. So I find it fascinating. Of course, in those years or in those times, the soul itself was often thought to be located somewhere in the stomach and not in the mind, which is something that rationalism promoted as an idea. But obviously, there was a certain awareness of this connection between feeding ourselves or our stomach and our psychological well-being, even if it wasn't described in those terms. And what are your thoughts about that? Is that perhaps also an ancient wisdom that deserves more attention?
Oh, no question about that. No question. Again, the brain and the gut use a unique communication system. It's called the vagal nerve. It allows the brain to have a two-way conversation with our gut. And so this is and bypassing the blood completely. It's really a neural system that basically is incredible. We really have two brains in the body. Our first brain is up here. It looks really smart. It's white, it's crinkly, it says, hey, it looks really wise. The second brain is in our gut. It says, it looks really dumb. It's stinky, it's slimy, it can't know what it's doing. These two brains are in constant communication. And it's really our hubris to ignore it. But now we have the technology to explore it for the first time and say, oh my God, we basically have missed the boat completely. Not completely, but we basically had ignored an incredibly important part of what we call health, and therefore the underlying cause of disease. Because again, anything that enters the gut will have an effect on the brain and vice versa. So again, it just makes the complexity of nutrition even more so. But because of that complexity, it makes it more difficult for the average person to say what's right and what's wrong. So we tend to basically gravitate almost like in the 14th century with the Black Death. What caused basically the Black Death? Oh, I know, witches. So let's burn witches and that will solve the problem. That didn't work. So as we get this complexity, it's really basically the goal of science, just to lay out what the problems can be, and therefore, how can you solve them? And to solve or to improve that gut-brain connection, the role of the diet will be critical.
So I hope you don't take this question as an offense, but does it bother you that considering this complexity, that science or the name of science often is misused for simplified solutions?
Well, science is basically allows us to basically unravel what seems to be the unknown. Mm-hmm. And so it says it allows us to put a more touch and feel. Before, let's say, really a decade ago, our knowledge of this gut-brain connection was virtually nil. So it's only in the last 10 years has the information exploded. Now it takes usually 1 or 2 generations for that to filter into the general population. And because of this complexity, it's saying, how do I tell a story? Well, you tell the story to say, listen to your grandmother. What did she say? You can't leave the table till you eat all your vegetables. And why? Vegetables are rich in fiber. Say, how boring. Well, fiber is very important because if the microbes in the gut don't get fed, and that's the only source they can use, they get angry. And when they get angry, we pay a price. So it's saying that we're coming back full circle, that we control to a great extent, if we choose to, our future. If we ignore it, and it'll basically abdicate responsibilities to somebody else, and that's a dangerous game to play. But the science, the science is basically growing to explain all these observations from many centuries ago.
Two things. First of all, sorry, we've got this cat here on our. So she's occasionally clawing at me. So that's what if I'm looking a little odd. So first of all, with the respect to the brain and the gut, it was about probably 10 years ago or more where there was this cryogenic fad where people were going to freeze their brains and then somehow they were going to be brought to life at a future time. And just a little while ago, when I'm finally realizing, more about the importance of the gut, I'm talking with Benjamin and saying, those people, they think they've got it, but they're half their brain at least is in their gut and they've only frozen the brain. So
they'll be reconnected with a malevolent gut. Then.
I don't know.
Well, this gives a new definition of half-wit.
Right. But then on the issue of dietary advice and fermentable fiber and stuff, have you ever had a conversation with Paul Saladino about his carnivore diet. Of course, it's sort of evolved, and now he's adding fruit and things like that. He's decided that pure meat is not for him after all. But what about the number of carnivores who insist that, you know, things are fine, that their gut microbiome is fine, and they just eat meat and that's all they eat?
Well, that's the beauty of opinion, but it's just, as you know, as you pointed about Saladino saying, yes, I say, yes, you need some fruits and vegetables. You need some fiber. Say, yes, well, that's a major, but people are saying, I'm looking for simple solutions. Where's the evil one? Carbohydrates are evil. Take them out of the diet. Or fat's evil. Take it out of the diet. What you need the right combination of protein, carbohydrates, and fat, not because it's inherently good, but because of the hormonal and genetic applications. And when I say genetic, there's a study published about 8 years ago. It said, what would happen if you went on a zone diet and looked at the changes in genes, gene expression? Well, what you see, if you do that, within 24 hours, there's a complete rearrangement of your genes, about 1/3 increase, 1/3 decrease in terms of expression, and 1/3 don't change. But the 1/3 that increased are where the genes primarily involved in reducing inflammation. And the genes that decreased were primarily the ones involved in increasing inflammation. Now, if we take that to its logical extension, within 1 day, you can change your genetic expression of your entire body.
Wow.
And how long can you control it? For the rest of your life. But say, oh, that's like science fiction. Say, that's called science.
Right.
So as we basically we find that basically our answer to basically living that longer and better health is not searching the internet, but basically sitting back and reflecting, saying, what does the body need? Yeah, the body needs omega-3 fatty acids, because without them, the brain doesn't work. The body needs the fruits and vegetables. Yes, they need the fiber, but they really need the polyphenols.
Mm-hmm.
So that's for the gut. And again, the hormones in the rest of the body, you've got to balance protein, carbohydrate, and fat the best you can every time you eat. And if you got a hand and an eye and a watch, you can do it.
Right. So the balance of the carbohydrates and the fats and the proteins, you do that properly at each meal, and that lasts you about 5 hours, right? For the fermentable fiber, you talk about the fact that if you've eaten the amount that you should in a day, maybe not, you wouldn't want to do it all in one meal, but if you did, it would still be processing for a good day or so. So you could have a day's length of time on that. You could buy yourself a day. With respect to the omegas and the polyphenols, what is the kind of time frame for those?
The time frame for the polyphenols, the half-life in the blood, that's assuming they get into the blood, is about 2 hours. They say, that's not very long. Say, yeah, it means you have to be eating polyphenols at every meal. The half-life of the omega-3 fatty acids is about 2 days. So it says I have to basically make sure I've got about maybe a reserve of maybe 3 or 4 days before my levels of the fatty acids in the blood drop to low levels. So again, these are dynamic principles. It's saying that, yes, like a drug, what's the lifetime of a drug in the body? About maybe a half-life of about a couple hours. That's why most drugs, you take them 3 times a day to maintain a stable level of the drug in the blood. That's why you want to eat 3 times a day, to maintain a stable level of these big building blocks that control very powerful aspects of our body's physiological functions. So basically the body works at peak efficiency all the time. In the old days, they call it habits.
Yes. Yeah, no, and it's easier to, keep doing once you've established a habit.
Exactly. But you have to have a reason why, and basically believe in the science that basically it makes sense. But you also have to have both subjective and objective markers. I gave you the objective markers. They will change in about 30 days. The subjective ones will change in about 3 to 7 days. So something's different.
Mm-hmm. So The subjective markers might be interesting for the audience, but how would you describe the impact of the wrong diet on the average Joe? What are the physical signs besides obviously obesity, but of course that doesn't happen overnight. So what are the signs to look for and the effects that can be improved by improving your diet?
Well, we come back now to that two-syllable word, cytokines. Because again, if you're under constant inflammation, you're making more cytokines. And what do cytokines do? They make you sick and they make you tired. So when you deal with chronic fatigue syndrome, basically you're talking about a mini cytokine storm. For those people who have gotten COVID-19, are the so-called long haulers, there's basically a constant of, malaise, and say, I just don't feel good. They're basically having a residual cytokine storm. They're unable to shut down the cell's production of cytokines. And that's the goal of that resolution zone. If you put these parts together, you can basically go inside every cell in your body and turn down an overactive inflammatory response. You reduce the levels of cytokines, and by doing so, you feel better. You're less depressed, you're less fatigued, you're less hungry.
So are there people with long COVID, as far as you're aware, being treated with omega-3s? No.
The reason why, there's no driving force. Say, I'm looking for a drug. Say, but you have the drug, a powerful drug that has, virtually no side effects but you have to use the drug. Now, the data is clear and published data that people who basically die from COVID, their ratio, one of those markers I talked about of arachidonic acid AMPK, is much, much higher than those who don't. You say, well, how can I bring it down? Say, you should have asked the question about 2 months before you got COVID. But again, there are a number of studies using omega-3 fatty acids to basically try to treat a cytokine storm, but there's not any great push for it because you can't make money on it. If I get patented omega-3 fatty acids, hey, you can basically go to venture capitalists and then they can go to some big drug company and say, we have a miracle treatment. But in reality we have to, as we understand inflammation, the more we understand what causes inflammation, we also have to understand what not only turns it off completely, but keeps it in that zone. Because every time we have an injury, you need an inflammatory response to address the impact. But then you have to turn it off and do it over and over and over again for a lifetime.
The arachidonic acid, you can, I think, make it yourself in your own body to some extent.
You can, but it's also basically derived from the diet too. So that, so the things that basically increase arachidonic acid are having a diet that's rich in omega-6 fatty acids, because they can be metabolized into arachidonic acid. These now become staples of the American diet. The other fact you need is relatively high levels of insulin. You get that when you have insulin resistance, because now those two mix together like basically a perfect storm, that you're driving the levels of arachidonic acid, making it more likely the cell will make inflammatory hormones as opposed to pro-resolution hormones.
Okay. I've looked, again, I've been going down all these different rabbit holes, and arachidonic acid is one of them. There are tables of dietary content, what's the food content of arachidonic acid. And I've noticed that its organ meats are pretty high. And then if you look at cuts that most people eat, one of the first is brisket. And we moved to Austin last year and started going to all the barbecues and eating a lot of brisket, and the more the better. And now I realize, in terms of your model, why that might not have been the most ideal thing, particularly if I wasn't getting enough omega-3s, right?
However, it tastes pretty good, doesn't it?
No, it tastes wonderful, but I'm not going to be eating as much of them anymore after reading.
And that's the whole aspect. It's not to avoid anything. It's saying, okay, I realize there's a consequence. How can I moderate that? So say, okay, I'll have my brisket and make sure I took my fish oil to counteract that, so I can maintain the balance of those two fatty acids, which turn on and turn off inflammation on a second by second basis in every one of our 100 trillion cells.
Amazing. So on the issue of, trying to get this into balance and hopefully trying to not just prevent future damage to your body, but maybe do whatever you can to your utmost to repair some of the past damage when we weren't listening to you, Dr. Sears. What is the appropriate way that you do this? So for me, I got some stuff from your store, and I had already been taking a different omega-3 supplement before I even got that order, once I realized, the folly of my ways. So, if I was to test, I wouldn't get any baseline of the ratio between the arachidonic acid and the EPA, for example. But what would you recommend going forward? You'd recommend testing at a couple different intervals, that ratio?
Of course,
how do you do it?
Because that ratio can change in a matter of a week or two. So it's a navigational buoy. So you're looking for what will be the right amount of intake of omega-3 fatty acids for your biochemistry. They'll keep you in that appropriate range. Really, it's an operational range, like a buoy. When you get outside the buoys, bad things happen. Inside the buoys, you're not going to run aground. So the blood is something you want to be using on at least once a year, if not twice a year, to say, how am I doing? And then I can make adjustments. I can make adjustments in the diet. I can make adjustments in the intake of polyphenols. I can make adjustments in the intake of omega-3 fatty acids until each of those operational parameters are in their appropriate ranges, their zones.
Could you go toxic on the polyphenols if you're doing too much of that?
The answer appears not to be. They are pretty benign. Unfortunately, they're in very low concentrations. So when you eat fruits and vegetables, how much do you have to eat to get enough polyphenols? Probably about 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. That's a lot. But if you can eat 10 servings of fruits and vegetables with the emphasis on vegetables, you'll probably be a pretty healthy person. So these are some of the, again, we didn't know until 1995 that the polyphenols did anything except give fruits and vegetables their color. Now we know they do a lot more, and they really activate what is the master switch in every cell. It's called AMPK. That's the master switch that basically controls our rate of aging. And we can, but that's under dietary control, and we can manipulate it if we choose to. Now, if we ignore it at our own risk.
You talk about delphinidins in the book. Resveratrol is another that people talk about. You're never going to be healthy and drink enough wine to get that. You would have to supplement that with an extract as well. The other one I wanted to ask you about was one that I've heard about recently from Chris Kresser, which is, and actually I don't know that it's a polyphenol, you can correct me, sulforaphane.
It's a new one for me. I've been around the polyphenol business for a long time.
Okay, that's from broccoli. It's and apparently it's very concentrated in broccoli sprouts or something.
Well, and broccoli is good to eat, sure. but it plays. It's not a polyphenol. It has some effects, but not nearly as much as the polyphenols if they activate AMPK. Because again, the broccoli, it's good for reducing oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is controlled by AMPK. It's like they said 2,000 years ago, all roads lead to Rome. Now we can say all roads to health lead through AMPK. Because if you can activate AMPK, you become a healthier individual. In fact, of many of the drugs we assume be of commonplace, we now are understanding their mode of action. Virtually every drug to treat diabetes, type 2 diabetes, acts through AMPK. The primary drug that people recommend for treating heart disease, statins, a recent paper came out, it acts through AMPK. So they developed the drug, but it turns out its mode of action was not what they thought. This is blind luck, it worked. So, but we can control AMPK through the diet. Now, it doesn't say we're going to throw those drugs away, but it says the more you control these critical factors in our metabolism by the diet, the less drug you'll need to control any residual symptoms. So it's not saying, drugs are bad. No, it's a hybrid. It's a food drug hybrid. Drugs are useful because they're more concentrated, but they also have greater side effects. Food is nice in that you have to be more compliant, but as far as I knowledge, we don't have any side effects of food because we didn't eat, we'd die. So it's making sure we have that compatibility and realizing that we are to a great extent responsible for our fate. Now, it doesn't say that bad things won't happen, but what you've done everything in your power to say, I did my best job to basically minimize the likelihood of decreasing my health span.
Mm-hmm. So your recommendation, if somebody has either maybe been sick for a long time with long COVID, or they just have other conditions over the course of their life, would be to get on this as soon as possible. You can already start with your next meal with, having the balance, the
zone balance,
the zone balanced meals.
Diet.
Get your omegas and your polyphenols. If you are not already balanced and you don't have your ratio of the arachidonic acid and the EPA together already, which I think you said takes about a month at least sometimes, are the polyphenols wasted during that time period?
Oh no, not
haven't
because
turned on the rest of the mechanism yet, or
no, yeah, you're
right
remember,
away, basically.
It's like playing football. You say, okay, my offense is not very good, but I'm counting my defense. So each one is doing a different part in what I call the resolution response. So again, the more players you have in the field, the better the outcome. So any one is good. A balanced diet, that's good, but the zone diet is not a balanced diet. It's an anti-inflammatory diet, but highly defined. I say, yes, this is how the composition is, and here's the data that shows it reduces inflammation. That's a good starting point. Adding more omega-3 fatty acids brings another group of players on the field. Adding the polyphenols brings another group on the field. So basically, the more tools you have in your toolkit, the faster and the better the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Your diet overlaps quite a bit with a paleo type diet.
The zone diet, when I first started working with this, my inspiration for it was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1985. It's called Paleolithic Diets. And so I took that data right there and said, that's a good starting point to find what a balance of protein to carbohydrate is. And in 2010, the really leading academic people in Paleolithic nutrition, and not the people who see on websites, but the academics, they came up with the appropriate balance of protein to carbohydrate in their estimation and fat that Paleolithic man consumed 15,000 years ago. Is virtually identical to the zone diet within one or 2 percentage points.
Mm-hmm. I remember very well reading in your first book, The Zone, how after the introduction of agriculture, people actually shrunk. And I found that a very compelling, well, being a historian and not a doctor, I found that a particularly compelling argument too.
Well, history is a wonderful thing. It doesn't always repeat, but it sure rhymes. So the fact is, by looking back in history, we can get some indications of what can we do going forward to allow our physiology to do the best it possibly can. Mm-hmm. So again, the classical, what they call Paleolithic diet, if you believe the academicians, it's identical to the zone diet. and I pointed out my first book of almost 30 years ago, the combinations of protein, carbohydrate were based on the early glimmers of what a Paleolithic diet might actually be. So people say, "Oh, it means raw meat." Say no. A Paleolithic diet is, primarily a lot of vegetables, a little fruits, and of not a lot of protein. So again, saying that's why on the plate you have the hand. You've got a 1/3 of the plate with some protein, and that's about, let's say, 3 to 4 ounces, not 2 pounds, and a lot of vegetables and a little fruit for dessert. And say, but that's what Grandma told me. Say, that's right, because she had the observations basically of millennia. I say, what seems to work and what doesn't.
Yeah.
One of the diets that I looked at in my whole bizarre journey that I won't bore you with was Norm Robillard has this diet that he calls the fast track diet to try to help people with severe heartburn and reflux and things like that. And he recommends sort of the opposite in the sense of cut back on fermentable fiber. Do you see a strategy like that as a decent temporary strategy to get off of acid blockers and things like that, and then switch to something like yours, or you would just go straight to your diet regardless of where you are and know that your body's going to settle itself out?
Well, my answer is going to be obvious. Yeah, just start with the zone diet because it's balanced. Who can argue with balanced? So you're looking at saying you have to have a diet that's protein adequate. You have to have a diet that is moderate in carbohydrate, but rich in fruits and vegetables. You need a diet that's low in fat, but rich in omega-3 fats and monosaturated fats. Okay, now who can argue with that?
Why low in fat specifically? If you were keeping your balance, could you have as much brisket as you want? I mean, within some kind of reason, don't make yourself fat or something, but you could have more fat as long as you got your omega-3s as well.
Well, the answer is yes and no. Because remember we talked about that master switch in every cell in our body called AMPK? It's under dietary control, but the door swings both ways. We talked about the things that increase its activity. That's good. But what are some of the things, dietary things, that decrease its activity? There are two. One, too many calories. Second thing, too much glucose. So again, it's a matter of balance. Once we understand what the rules are, and they're not going to change, we say, how do we play by the rules? So again, the first thing you want to do is the first thing that Hippocrates said for our physician: do the patient no harm. Start with a balanced diet. Don't go off in 18 different directions. Start a balanced diet, and then basically make adjustments. Not in reading a blog or reading, or guessing. Take the blood, and the blood will tell you how to make the adjustments. And all of a sudden, it's science, because we're not all genetically the same, but we're not all that genetically different.
Right.
So I think the moment is right now. You've quoted Hippocrates. So here's our our most challenging question. If we imagine 2 years ago, I won't need to contextualize any further, 2.5 years ago, the United States had Dr. Barry Sears, health czar, who could decide.
Please spare the country that horrendous idea. But let's go on.
I would spare you, but I think it would be good for the country. But what would you have done, and in what order?
Well, the first thing I said, our COVID-19 epidemic is really only part of a two-part rule. It's fueled primarily by our obesity epidemic. And all these are tied up in terms of unfortunately, money. Our diet is becoming more and more ultra-processed. One, it drives down the cost. It makes it more convenient. But there's basically the blind side. You say you're doing everything in your power to take this exquisite mechanism we have called the body and its metabolism, and like throwing sugar in a gas tank. Only bad things are going to happen. But that's basically preaching. Preaching doesn't work. So you basically have to give them alternatives. They're saying, and usually incentives. So say the easiest incentive, because the best marker of cytokines are very hard to measure, but the best marker that's easy is basically that ratio of those two fatty acids. I say, on your taxes, if your ratio is between 1.5 and 3, we're going to give you a 30% discount on your income taxes. And all of a sudden, basically, you have a driving
which will
force.
Probably be saved anyway on healthcare expenses, right?
Right now, healthcare expenses are 18% of our GDP, and they're going to grow. So we're kind of kicking this down the road, but saying this is what's going to bankrupt our country for getting people an incentive to stay healthy that measure on the blood. So it's not saying I think I'm healthy. Say the blood, your discount depends on where you are. That is money has a return on investment of astronomical proportions.
What if you could have a free market solution for that same thing, which would be that the insurance companies would give you a discount on your health insurance premiums or your life insurance premiums in various ways?
That's what I postponed to or proposed to many insurance companies about 30 years ago, especially term insurance. Term insurance says, I'm going to buy a 1-year policy and I hope I don't die.
Right.
And the insurance company says, I'll sell it to you and I hope you do die. So say, okay, I'll sell term insurance company policies and say, I'll sell it to you, and if you don't die, you're a winner. But I'm only going to sell it to you if your blood is in a certain range. Say, well, how long will give me that range? Well, if you're looking to say, well, we use only one marker because that's the easiest one, that ratio of arachidonic acid to EPA. It'll take you about, 4 weeks. Say, this is not a bad bet. So in that 4-week period, you can say, I can get my blood down there, and it turns out, but I really don't trust it, so I want to test every 6 months.
Right.
For 1 year. So at the end of the time, it's a win-win situation. So there's lots of things that can be done, but we have to find a unique way of doing it, because basically being a nagging of granny is not going to work.
Okay, but I'm thinking that one of the few decent things that might have come out of this period, this COVID period, is that people start to realize the importance of their underlying health on their ability to withstand the assault from viruses that are common or uncommon to us. And so I'm hoping that they will just come to you, that it wouldn't require an intervention by government, certainly, or not even, something from their insurance company, that they would realize that they need to do something about this and as a lifestyle, not just as a one-hit wonder.
Well, hope does spring eternal.
Yeah. Now, I think Benjamin has one last thing he's looking at here, asking you, but we have to then end and respect your time. We are so grateful that you've been with us.
Yeah, no, I don't think with all the notes taken, I can find it specifically, but more generally, I find it interesting, let's put it that way, how we seem to be as Western society in this cycle of anxiety and addictive behavior, cyclically, assuming that the diet plays an important role in the whole process, where we are looking for quick fixes all the time, and where the industry, and of course that goes specifically for the pharma industry, they're interested in selling and in offering those quick fixes. So do you recognize that picture at all, or?
Oh, of course. It basically is, it's at some point, it's an old saying many years ago, discipline will set you free. So again, the more dietary discipline you have, then the less concerns of looking for magic pills. But again, these have been the philosophical questions that have been argued for thousands of years without basically a consistent answer. But that's the fun part. It means basically another old saying: if a challenge can be completed within your lifetime, it's not noble enough. So I say this is a challenge that's not going to complete in my lifetime by any stretch of the imagination, but it makes it a noble challenge. And that's the fun part.
We thank you for your tremendous contribution to it. And we're going to do our best to continue to spread the word and encourage people to take their health into their own hands this way, even if it requires such diligence on a regular basis. You're going to keep me honest on this?
Oh yeah, you know, it can be very convincing.
First step, a little less brisket.
Yes, yeah, that's already been happening though. I already got, like I said, many rabbit holes, but we come back to this. It's amazing. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, you are a hero, definitely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for those kind words.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.